Looks like we have the final piece of the 24-25 Columbus Blue Jackets puzzle as Cole Sillinger has a brand new contract. We're going to talk about that on today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get things started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. I also have to let you know that now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial at NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And how we're going to get started is we're going to talk about the Cole Sillinger contract, signed late last week. Not an unexpected signing, but the term and the AAV were both a little surprising to me. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what that means for the contract going, or what that means for his next contract, what that means for the player going forward. And that's the final cap space that needs doing. So what are they going to do with that extra $15.5 million that they've got knocking around? So we're going to talk about all of that on today's show, but I wanted to start off by talking a little bit about Cole Sillinger. I believe I did a season review for Cole Sillinger at the kind of end-ish of the regular season / start of the offseason. I like this contract a lot. It's not as big as I thought it was going to be, kind of in terms of both term and AAV. I thought he was going to get a longer contract, and I thought it was going to be more expensive. So if you, happen to not have seen, Cole Sillinger signed a 2-year contract extension, $2.25 million per year, $4.5 million overall. That will take him to the end of the 25-26 season. I believe he becomes a UFA in 2028. So he will have 2 seasons of RFA left under him before, once this contract runs out. So it's a fine contract. It surprised me a little bit. I don't think it was necessarily lowballing, but I'm not surprised. I am kind of surprised that this was the last one that got hammered out as well. You know, I know when we were talking about, I was like, right, okay, you get Marchenko sorted first, and then you get Sillinger, and then you probably argue with Ken Johnson's agent a little bit. And in fact, Ken Johnson, I believe, was the first one signed. Kirill Marchenko very shortly after that. And then we had to wait for Cole Sillinger. Got the Patrick Laine trade out of the way. And very soon after that, Cole Sillinger, brand new contract. And that's kind of the end of Don Waddell's to-do list this offseason. I don't think that this is a perfect roster by any stretch of the imagination. But something I want to talk about, and we're going to talk about kind of this week as a whole, is what the roster looks like now, because this is a different roster than the one last year. And I know that when Don Waddell got the job, he said, listen, there's probably going to be half a dozen new faces on this roster this season. So we'll see we'll look at what's happened. We'll look at who could be new, who's gone, etc., etc. And that's kind of coming up later. But I wanted to talk about Cole Sillinger specifically today. I thought he had a really good season. I just double checked. I did, in fact, do a full season review on Cole Sillinger's 23-24 seasons. We're not going to go into all of that again, but I thought he had a really good rebound season from that miserable sophomore season that he had in 22-23, where he ended up getting sent down to the Monsters for a bunch of it. This season, played 77 games, had 13 goals, 19 assists for 32 points, which is one more than the career high he set during his rookie year. On, I think, a worse team. So I feel fine about, essentially he was a third line center for a lot of the season. I feel fine about getting 32 points from your third line center, who I think literally just turned 21. Turned 21 in May. So he's still extrememely, extremely young, had played over 200 NHL games before he turned 21. And there's I don't know that he's ever going to hit the ceiling that I think a lot of people wanted him to, especially after that really strong rookie season he had. But if he turns into, a really, really good third line center that can play on the second line if needed, like, that feels great to me. And this feels like not necessarily a show me contract, but a keep doing what you're doing contract. And then in 2 years, we'll reassess. Not reassess necessarily, because I don't think there's any kind of question about that. I am surprised that he was the only one of the kind of the quote unquote the three big RFAs that got 2 years instead of 3 years. I would have given him more term. And I would probably have given Kent Johnson less. Just kind of basically flip those around. Give Cole Sillinger 3, give Kent Johnson 2. It's more of a show me year for Johnson, I think. I think Cole Sillinger proved himself this year. Obviously, I talked a little bit there about how he played on the third line for a lot of the season, but when the center started dropping like flies, Boone Jenner missed time because of personal reasons at the end of the season. Adam Fantilli out injured. That kind of catapulted Cole Sillinger into that first line center role, just kind of by necessity. And so he ended up playing a lot of games against, the other team's top line centers. So, he played against Sidney Crosby. He got the McDavid matchup. He got the Pettersson matchup in Vancouver, I believe. He got the McKinnon matchup in Colorado. He got the Barzal matchup in Long Island. Like, all of these really, really good first line centers, and he didn't amaze and didn't blow everyone out of the water, but he held his own, which I think is really important as a young center in this league. I don't think I was looking for him to, be incredible. I was looking for him to hold his own against guys like this, because if he can hold his own against someone like, for example, Connor McDavid, then the competition that he's more likely to face is way under McDavid's standard. And if he can hold his own against McDavid, he should be able to skate rings around, whoever the second or third line center on the Oilers is. I don't know who it is off the top of my head. I'm very sorry for not having this this innate Oilers knowledge. I try not to pay attention to the Edmonton Oilers if I can help it. Anyway, what all of this means is Cole Sillinger, I think, is only going to get better from here. I'm really, really excited to see what he does under the new coach. I think he was one of the guys that thrived a little more than most under Vincent. I think his ice time was more or less consistent. He had the highest average time on ice of his career at just over 16 minutes. And if I very quickly scroll through, he was, that seems about right. There was no games where he was only playing 8 minutes and games where he was playing 24 minutes. There was a couple of, we played 12 minutes in this one game. We played 20 minutes in another game, but I think 12, he had one game where he only played 9:32. That was October 20th. So very, very early in the season. But I think he thrived more than most of the young guys did under Vincent. So I'm excited to see what he does now that, and again, I'm going to talk about it. I've talked about it so much. Consistency in your line mates. He had, for the most part, he had consistent ice time. Can he get consistent line mates? I'm just pulling up the Blue Jackets regular season time on ice leaders in terms of line combinations. His most consistent line mates were Alexander Texier and Kirill Marchenko. They had 204 minutes of ice time. And then it goes down to second place was Johnson, Sillinger, Bemstrom at 122 minutes. And again, not everyone is going to be that lined with the Rangers that had 850 minutes of ice time together this season. But if you could get 500 minutes with the same guy, that feels huge to me. So just to kind of recap, I like Cole Sillinger a ton. I like this contract for him. I am surprised it wasn't bigger. And I'm interested to see what happens going forward. So we're going to talk about that in a minute here. But needless to say, I'm expecting a big season from Cole Sillinger. And I think you guys should be as well. So in a minute, we're going to talk about the future of Cole Sillinger, what this contract means for him and kind of for the salary cap as a whole. So we're going to do that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. First, you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel. They are America's #1 sportsbook for a reason. Well, we've got something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. So if you are a Bengals fan or a Browns fan or a non-Ohio football team fan, you can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial to watch your favorite team. And from there, all you need to do is have a YouTube TV base plan, and you're going to be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon at a market game. All you need is a Google account, a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So if you get really disheartened by the fact that the Browns haven't won a game in 2 months, you can just be done with that. Sorry to crap on the Browns. They were the first team I thought of. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook, and you can keep winning all season long. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We've talked about Cole Sillinger's past season. We've talked a little about what I want from Cole Sillinger going forward. I wanted to talk about kind of the salary in general, this contract in general, because I was surprised by the 2-year term, frankly. It didn't surprise me that it was under 3. It did surprise me that it wasn't. I thought it was going to be either 3 years or 5 years, eat up a year of UFA or take him to the year right before UFA. However, looking at the salary cap going forward, I wonder if this is a case of Don Waddell trying to space out those big contract signings, So next offseason should be a pretty quiet one. Money coming off the books, Sean Corrali, Matthew Olivier, just a Danforth. And Traffix Wolanski. I would be surprised if all 4 of those guys are back. I think Olivier stays. I don't know if any of the other 3 guys stay, as much as it pains me to admit it. I think Traffix Wolanski might be leaving at the end of next season, which would be a shame because I like him a lot. But in terms of RFAs, Ivan Provorov's money comes off the book as well. Jordan Harris will need a new deal. Jack Johnson's money comes off the book. Jake Christensen's money comes off the book. Danil Tarasov needs a new contract. And in terms of non-rostered players, there's no one there really that I'm looking at as they need to get that guy re-signed immediately. A couple of guys that are nice to have, but I'm not going to be upset if they don't re-sign Ole Julian Bjorkvik, for example. So a lot of money coming off the books. In terms of contracts, I would expect Jordan Harris to get a raise. I would expect Danil Tarasov to get a new contract. And I would expect Dmitry Voronkov is probably going to get a similar contract to what the young guys got this year. So somewhere in the realm of 2 to 3 years for somewhere between 1.8 million and 3.8 million, which is what Ken Johnson made versus what Kromachenko made. So kind of somewhere in that range for Dmitry Voronkov. The season after that is where it starts to get a little tricky. Boone Jenner's contract is done. Cole Sillinger is going to need a new contract. Igor Chinikov needs a new contract. Adam Fantilli and Gavin Brindley are both coming off their ELCs. Eric Branson's money is gone. I don't imagine he'll be back, but they might bring him back for a 1-year cheap deal, whatever. David Juracek's entry level is up. And in terms of again, guys down in the minors, there's not really anyone James Malatesta's ELC is up. Stanislav Svozil ELC is up. And Jet Greaves will need a new contract as well. So, I'm throwing a lot of names out you here, but it's pretty well spaced out. It's not a case of the Blue Jackets going into a season and going into an offseason being wow, we have to re-sign 7 key RFAs to long-term deals before they go to UFA. There's money coming off the books. They have, as it stands right now, they still have $15.9 million in cap space. So we'll talk a little bit about what they could do with that later on and why I think that, they are probably just going to stand pat with that. So that's 1 season, 2 seasons, and then the season after that, Marchenko is going to need a new contract. Kent Johnson is going to need a new contract. And there's no one. Mazlikins' money is coming off the books. then. So that'll add some flexibility depending on what happens there. Again, handful of guys will be coming off their ALCs. Luca Pinelli, Luca Del Balbaluz. Potentially, Deta Matejczak's money will be coming off his ELC. Like potentially someone like Caden Lindstrom will be coming off his ELC. I don't think that he will burn his. I don't think he'll use his ELC this year. I think it will slide, but it's. But my point here that I'm trying to make is, I don't know what Don Waddell's thought process was for this. I wonder if he looked at how many guys were coming off their ELCs or how many guys were going to need new contracts in the 27-28 season and decided he didn't want a third player that was a year away from being a UFA that he was going to have to try to re-sign. So he gives him 2 years. I think they're betting on him being really good in terms of like player development and things like that. But there's a lot of money moving around, and this is my argument anyway. Is I don't necessarily agree with it, but I do think that it is Don Waddell's way of like trying to space out those important contracts, because I think they think that Cole Sillinger is going to be one of those cornerstone pieces of the franchise. A guy that is not going to be an elite game-changing player, but someone who is going to be around for a long time and who is going to be really good for this team. That's kind of how I'm looking at it. In terms of the cap going forward, typically the Blue Jackets are in a really good place right now. I know a lot of people are think that they should try it. They should have retained salary on Liner, which I don't necessarily disagree with, but they did what they did. Merzlikins' contract is coming off the books in 3 years. Branson's is going to be done in 2. The Severson contract is what it is. I don't love it. That's really the only contract that I'm sitting here looking, and I'm like, man, that contract really doesn't look great. Maybe he'll have a bounce back year this year, but I did not think he was a $6.5 million player last season. Who knows? We'll see what happens. I think putting him, and I talked about this a little bit on the Squadcast with Laura and Ian of Locked On Habs, of like, do you put him with Jordan Harris and let Jordan Harris do all of the like stealth heavy lifting and let Severson do kind of what he does, which is be good at offense and occasionally just his brain blue screens, and he has a complete nightmare defensive like brain fart, essentially. Who's to say? But the Blue Jackets are in a pretty good space are in a pretty good shape with their cap, which is not a bad thing. So I want to talk a little bit kind of going forward, what to do with all of that cap space and what Don Waddell's plan might be for all of this cap space. We're going to do that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I'm going to tell you about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience is the formula for winning championships, but it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. They've got superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you are into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. They've got over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You're always going to find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every single time, or you're going to get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day every single day. Let's finish up by talking about all of that cap space that the Blue Jackets have, because I think a lot of people are getting kind of itchy fingers about it, or, itchy keyboard fingers about it. And I talked a little bit about this again in an episode last week about, I don't know if this is cap space that they need to spend, Cap space is king. A lot of people talk about how cap space is only important if you're going to weaponize it. And I wonder if the Blue Jackets don't need to spend cap space on like almost all of this cap space, I think, is earmarked for the future. You know, like I think the hope is that they're going to extend Voronkov next season. They're going to extend Fantilli the year after that. I think the hope is that Fantilli is going to get like the Matty Beniers contract, which I think was 7 times 7 or near enough. You know, I think they're looking at Chinakhov having a breakout year. They're looking at Sillinger getting a raise. They're looking at Marchenko getting a raise. All of these players are going to need raises, and like that's all going to come out of this. Obviously, there's money coming off the books. Provorov, Gabranson, Merzlikins, etc. Potentially a guy like Boone Jenner, who I don't think will go anywhere, but I guess it really depends on where the Blue Jackets are kind of in their timeline as to whether, you know, Boone Jenner's contract is up next, not this summer, but next summer. Or that is to say, the 2026 offseason. If the Blue Jackets are not in a player position, does he go somewhere to as a playoff rental like Nick Foligno did? You know, but I think that that's what all of this cap space is for. Now, I wonder if they have vague plans to take contract from somewhere else. In terms of like guys that are maybe at the end of their contracts, you know, they've got 1, maybe 2 years left. Do the Blue Jackets want to eat that salary to give other teams? So, for example, the Seattle Kraken, I believe, are looking to move on from Brandon Tanev, who is making a not insignificant amount of money. I'm just pulling up the Seattle Kraken page right now. Brandon Tanev is making $3.5 million this season as then a UFA. The Seattle Kraken obviously just signed Matty Beniers to that big contract, and they are currently sitting at, they have $4,000 of cap space right now. That's it. You know, $4,000, not $4 million, $4,000. So I wonder if there was talk of as soon as the Line trade went through, 2 GMs reached out to Don Waddell asking about their like, hey, can we shed some cap at you and we'll make it worth your while? So I wonder if there's a situation where, you know, they take a Brandon Tanev, they take all of that contract, and they and we'll also take a first-round pick for our troubles. Thank you very much. I don't think it'll be a first-round pick. It might be a second. I don't know. The Kraken do have all of their picks for the next 3 years, plus 2 fourth-round picks this year and next year. So, like, that's not out of the realm of possibility. They take a first-round pick, they take a Brandon Tanev, and they just, again, flip him at the deadline. And that's it. They could take a second-round pick for him now, flip him at the deadline, get another second-round pick. Then you've had 2 second-round picks for basically nothing, you know? So I wonder if that's kind of in Don Waddell's wheelhouse. I can't think off the top of my head. Like, Oliver Bjorkstrand is another name that comes to mind with Seattle. Would you take Oliver Bjorkstrand back? He's making $5.4 million for the next 2 seasons, and he had a pretty solid season with the Kraken this season, and we'll see. Kind of, it's actually still the extension that he signed with Columbus before they traded him, which is quite funny. In terms of his stats this season, he had 59 points in 82 games, 20 goals, 39 assists, was named to the All-Star game for Seattle for the first time in his career. At the end of his contract, he will be a 31-year-old UFA. Is that a player that the Blue Jackets have some interest in taking back? You know, he was kind of a casualty of bringing in Gaudreau and re-signing Laine. The Laine contract is gone. Do they bring Bjorkstrand back? He is for my money anyway, I think he is a really underrated player, especially in terms of like transition games defensively. Like, there's your winger to play with Monahan and Gaudreau, you know, or you put Marchenko up there. There's Bjorkstrand, there's your winger to play with Fantilli and whoever's on the other end of that. You know, Ken Johnson, whoever. You know, I feel pretty strongly about that. positively. So, you know, it's not, I see a lot of people being like, oh, Don Waddell is just going to use all this money to give some 32-year-old $9 million for the next 7 seasons at next year's free agent day. And I don't see that happening at all. You know, I think a lot of people kind of got a little bit scared by the Monahan deal. It is what it is. Would I have given him that much term and that much money? No, but I'm not like, I'm sitting here and I'm like, they have $15 million, almost $16 million of cap space. It's fine. They can give him $5 million. Whatever. You know, if in 2 seasons he's still the number 1 center over guys like Fantilli, then we'll have to start having conversations. But as of right now, I think bringing him in now, this is a contract that is going to pay dividends at the front, and at the end is probably going to be an overpay, but that's fine. Sometimes you overpay for players, you know? So that's kind of how I feel about the cap space situation. I'm not looking for them to go out this offseason and like trade for Mitch Marner and sign him to a $15 million 8-year contract or whatever, or trade for Leon Draisaitl or any of these other big names that kind of have come up in, oh, maybe they don't want to re-sign with their team, you know? I don't think that's what's happening. I think that they could probably weaponize some of this cap space if they wanted to, but I also don't think that there's anything wrong with them standing pat right now. Teams are always in need of cap space during the season. You know, is it a case of they sit here and they wait until November when some team has injury problems and you know, needs cap space to call someone up or whatever? You know, I'm looking at the Vegas Golden Knights specifically. You know, I feel like cap relief is something that they could always use. I feel like the Oilers are kind of in a weird space with their cap right now in terms of paying. Obviously, they let those 2 guys go for offer sheets to St. Louis. Even with those 2 guys being gone, they've still got under $1 million in cap space. You know, there's stuff to be done there. Potentially, you know, not sure who off the top of my head, but like there's definitely stuff to be done there. So we'll see. In terms of going forward, I'm not worried about the cap. Just like point blank. I know a lot of people are like, oh, the cap is really badly managed in Columbus. Like, it's not. It's fine. Is it the best cap management in the league? No, probably not. But the cap right now is fine. I am interested to see what the roster looks like in October on opening night. But I'm tempering my expectations, but I am cautiously optimistic, ? We're going to kind of talk about a little bit kind of as the week goes on. I'm going to do another 3 episodes this week, and it's probably going to be tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday. I'm traveling the upcoming weekend for a wedding, so we'll hopefully be trying to get all of my stuff out at the start of the week. But I want to try and look at, okay, is the projected roster for next season better than last season? And so we'll do the forwards, we'll do the defense, we'll do the goaltending, and we'll try and wrap it all up in one nice, neat little boat. Hopefully say, yes, this roster is better than it was last season, or no, this roster is worse than it was last season, or this roster is basically the same as it was last season. So that's going to be the plan for the rest of the week, unless something explosive happens in the news. I am taking a flight on Thursday, so if there's any big news to happen, it will probably happen on Thursday. I'm just warning you guys now, but that's kind of all I've got for today. Tomorrow, like I said, we're going to look at the forward core of the Blue Jackets. We're going to take a look at kind of what that looks like without Laine. We're going to look at what the opening night roster could look like, and is it better than the opening night roster from last season? I've been Jay Foster. Thank you for listening, for making us your first listen of the day every single day. Locked on Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms, on YouTube and on SiriusXM. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSDER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, please feel free to email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. And thank you once again for listening. Until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.